Hello and welcome everybody to today's webinar on OT security. My name is Maria and I'm part of the Nordic marketing team. And while I can't share very much on this topic of OT security, I can help all of you who are listening get in touch with our experts. So I'll be here with you behind the scenes and I'm ready to take your questions and make sure that they reach Björn, Matthias, and Andreas. So if you have any questions after the webinar, you can head on over to our website, orangecyberdefense.com. We have a really good OT ebook that you can download, and we also have contact forms so that you can get in touch with us. But during the webinar, use these chat and the question tabs and send your questions over, and I'll make sure that they reach our experts. After the webinar is over, you'll also receive a link from us, an email with a link so that you can rewatch any part of this, and also have the links to that ebook and to get in touch with us. So now let's go ahead and get to the good part, and I will hand over the screen to our CTO in Norway, Björn.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning, everyone. I'll try to just jump right into the agenda. If I can advance the slideshow. Maybe I haven't gotten the permissions I need to do that. Let's see here. I think maybe the esteemed Andreas needs to give me permission to advance or just do it himself. There we go. Let's just get all of the bugs over with in the beginning. So we've tried to parse this webinar into three main parts for a total of around 50 minutes. So the first part would be the who. So either you have to advance it, Andreas, or I have to get permission because I can't do anything yet. There we go.
Did it work?
I got a pop-up, but there we go. Did you click or did I?
I didn't.
Okay, then it's me. And now I think I lost the presentation entirely.
Like you said, Björn, we get the technical difficulties out of the way in the beginning.
Yeah.
That's great. We'll let a few more people join.
I think you need to reshare, Andreas.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Maria,
On my end, I'm not.
Give me the possibility to share again, Maria.
Coming your way. Should be yours now.
So
let's see. Trying to click again here. So three parts, as I said, who, why, and how. So the who part is basically just a brief introduction of Orange Cyberdefense, who we are as a company, what we're doing, and a short intro of the people you'll be hearing from today, myself included. Then we'll move into a sort of an introductory or a sort of a justification for why we're focusing on industrial security, with me basically outlining some current threat landscapes surrounding OT attacks and the current geopolitical climate. And then we'll move into the, I would say, the main part of the show where I try to sort of hand it over to Andreas and Martin for some insights into how we can sort of mitigate the threats that I sort of outline in part two. So we'll see if that logical thread sort of hangs together throughout the next hour. And let's just dive right into it. So Orange Cyberdefense, a lot of you joining, I guess you know us from before, so I'll make this pretty brief. We are one of the top managed security services providers in Europe. We're the sort of the Orange Group, multinational telco, where there's sort of specialist security, cybersecurity unit. Yeah, we're a bit over 3,000 employees in total today. So a lot of us here in the Nordics, but also obviously in the other European countries. And we also have presences around the world, which I'll get to on the next slide. Yeah, we have our in-house CERT, which is mentioned there, that feeds a lot of telemetry and threat intelligence. And we serve a variety of different customers, as stated here as well. A lot of them delivering obviously the services that Andreas and Martin are working a lot with within OT and protecting CNI around the world. So yeah, globally distributed. And we apparently skipped that. Let me see if I can jump back. Yeah, just a brief geomap here of our presences and different sort of capabilities. So the different colored dots are explained at the bottom there. It's basically our cybersecurity operations centers and our network operations centers that are spread around. We see we have the main footprint is in Europe, but we followed our large European customers and other companies around the world. So when they've established a presence elsewhere, we follow them around. And we also have great colleagues around in the African continent. So yeah, truly a global community here. I'll just jump into the presentation part or the presenter part here, and I'll hand it over to Martin, who can start introducing himself.
Yes, my name is Martin. I'm the Danish part of this Nordic sandwich you got here. I work as a senior trusted advisor with our large enterprise customers. Why am I presenting on an OT webinar? I come from a long career in energy. I started out with the IT side, so I'm one of the people who started with IT and then pivoted into OT from there, because a lot of the IT we were handling in energy was related to OT, and since later then pivoted directly into pure OT, and now doing security architecture for enterprises. And I'll hand it over to Andreas.
Yes, hi, I'm Andreas Jacobson. I'm working as solution architect for the OT side, based in Sweden, and have been working with Orange for about 3 years. I have a background where I have been working on a dairy company for almost 26 years. With various roles, and was responsible for the OT side on the 4 factories in Sweden the 4 to 5 years before I moved over to Orange. John.
Yeah. So yeah, my name is Bjørn Rasmussen. I'm the CTO here in Orange Cyberdefense Norway. I also, in that role, I do a little bit of everything. It feels like sometimes, but one of the fun things is I get to collaborate a lot with my colleagues, especially here in the Nordics. So worked with Andreas and Martin before, but I'm not a traditional sort of technologist, I would say. My main background is from the police and military here in Norway. I did around 10 years in the police. Obviously, my sort of background here is within cyber security and cyber attacks targeting the private and public sector in Norway. So I've done a lot of investigative work around that. And I guess my sort of also background in the private sector has been a lot to do with threat intelligence. So I guess that's sort of my reason for being here today and trying to present a bit on the threats that Andreas and Martin are working so hard to counter. Yeah, so I guess that's it. Let's just dive right into the main part here, and I'll try to provide some recent research-based threats that we feel should be front and center for everyone working with industrial security today. I have sort of 2 main points to make here. The first here, the past 36 years of OT attacks, that's basically a study that we did. I believe we started it around 2 or 3 years ago, basically our security research center, which house a group of our sort of top researchers. They're the people dedicated to only doing security research. They started a project where they tried to analyze all of the publicly reported attacks that had an impact on OT networks ever. So they went as far back as they could, and they tried to analyze the attacks, and I'll basically just show that in the next slide. So what they found was that the first reported attack was back in 1988, which is 36 years if we count up to 2024, which is the most recent sort of update I have on the data sets. We have probably more that we'll be publishing soon for 2025. But anyway, the picture looks like this. So the asterisk there, I've explained at the bottom. We had some inclusion criteria, right, to count a reported attack. We needed to know at least 4 out of 5 of the following, like the time, basically the year it happened, the location it happened, down to the country, who it sort of impacted, so the name of the company in most cases, and what industry sector that company was in. If there was an attribution to an adversary type, at least, if it was like an insider threat, or it was a state sponsored, or it was somebody else, and the initial access vector. So that gave us a total of 166 attacks distributed as follows. So obviously there's something that sticks out here that I tried to highlight as well. And something happened around 2020. I can tell you that the bar for 2024 is probably a lot higher now because we've gotten more data. So something obviously happened around the last 5-year period. And to try to answer what that could be, we need to look further into the data set. First, looking at who were the attackers, who was sort of the attributed type of attacker behind these different incidents. So looking at the threat actor type and breaking them down into sort of just archetypes, we see immediately that what happened around 2020 was a huge increase in the number of criminal profit motivated attackers, right? So they're the ones driving this increase in attacks against OT networks. And that sort of also coincides a lot with those of us working a lot with the traditional IT security, right? And a lot of you here as well. This is the surge of ransomware as a service, the emergence of Bitcoin as a ransom payment method, and all of that lovely stuff that leaves us in the situation they have on the IT side. So that obviously we see that impacting the OT side as well. And maybe trying to delve into how does that sort of transfer? How does the ransomware threat against an IT environment transfer into OT attacks being reported? And obviously we have to look into what they're actually targeting in the networks of these reported OT attacks. And we have the same timeline here. You see again at the bottom, some years are missing, those years that we didn't actually see any reported attacks. That's the reason for that. But we have a legend at the top here using like 1A, 1B, 1C. And we see immediately that the 1A category is again the driver, and that's named IT targeted. And the reason for that is we have an explanation for this in the Security Navigator for both 2025 this year and last year when we first published this project. But it's basically dividing these type of attacks into 2 categories based on what type of tactics, techniques, and procedures the attackers used, which is the TTPs here under the category types. And basically saying that category 1, the attackers are using techniques that will work on a traditional IT network. Now, these are, again, the techniques deployed by most of these ransomware threat actors. So that's appears to be the main driver for the increased attacks on OT as well. So it seems that what's happening is that a lot of this is not due to the threat actors targeting operational technology specifically, rather than they're targeting the IT networks connected to the OT technology. And what has happened is that we have increasingly hooked our OT networks into IT. So it's the confluence of IT and OT that seems to be the main driver for the increased number of attacks against OT. which is in some terms comforting. It doesn't appear to be like a lot of specialized threat actors that are really good at destroying OT networks that are coming out of the woodworks or getting educated all of a sudden, at least in the last period. But obviously the threat is very real to the OT owners. And again, one of the last sort of slides on this topic is just trying to show the Purdue level that's being affected by these different attacks. So I guess all of you joining this call are familiar with the Purdue model. If not, I'll not sort of waste everyone's time going into it, but you can look it up. But the main point is that the higher up on the Purdue level you move, the closer you get to the IT side of things. And the further you get from the actual physical operations of the plant or whatever is in question. So on the highest level here, this is, again, happening on the interface between the OT and IT. So since 2020, most of the attacks are targeting at the top level here. That's not to say you can still see flows here going from 2020 as well, all the way down to level 1. And these are the advanced attacks. It's not to say that those aren't very serious when they occur. If you have like a Trident attack or somebody leveraging tools like Indestroyer 2 or something. But our point is that that is very rare in comparison to the vast number of attacks we see that are profit motivated and rather happen by almost accident in some cases, where the threat actor is targeting the IT network. They get sufficient access where they can suddenly see some OT components and say, what happens if I just poke that? And it sort of goes down because it might not be designed that way. So that's the main sort of issue that we're highlighting and one of the findings in this report. I see we have a question here as well. Maria, please feel free to interrupt me, by the way, if there's anything that you feel we should address. But otherwise, we'll take it at the end and we'll answer behind the scenes. So on the second point is the sort of the geopolitics of it all, right? We see a lot of reports around this. I wanted to highlight something that came out recently to keep it quite fresh. So most of you probably know ENISA, their EU agency for cybersecurity. They publish great reports, and one of their annual reports, the Threat Landscape report, is also a good read. I've linked it in the presentation here. And one of their sort of findings, so ENISA basically based this report on a lot of different incidents that occur in 2025. And they have around 4,000 or 5,000, I think it's around 4,000 incidents this year. And one of the trends they're highlighting is that they see attacks targeting OT technology or OT networks or CNI, national critical national infrastructure. And these are being claimed to have been conducted by hacktivists. And that's sort of a trend that's rising in ENISA's findings. And they highlight a few specific threat actors by name. I've included some of the examples here. Z-Pen Test Alliance, they targeted a dam in Norway quite recently, got a lot of coverage on that. And Mr. Hamza is another one. And I also linked some of our investigation reports that you can check out for further insights on those two threat actors and their methods. But the point is that this also correlates a lot with what we're seeing on our research side as well. And we published a paper in September, or rather our researchers did, which highlights this sort of evolution. Now, I added the asterisks here, or the quotation marks on hacktivists, because it's just to sort of highlight how they've changed in what they're targeting and who they're sort of championing, who they're sort of in favor of. And there's been a very distinct evolution there since like the mid 80s, with the original sort of digital utopia, it's called in the paper, where we had this like privacy rights and keeping the internet open and free and free speech and so on, where it sort of morphed into this sort of anti-establishment movement with Anonymous and Black Lives Matter, and these are real political movements that used a lot of the digital space to get their messaging across. Whereas, since what happened in 2014 was that Russia annexed part of what has traditionally been thought of as Ukraine, so with the peninsula, and that sort of started a spark with all of these hacktivism groups sort of coming out in support of governments. So not anti-establishment, not sort of free speech, but proposing or being in direct support of the agenda of a state government. So that's one of the sort of the things that they highlight in this research. And they also highlight that since 2022, with the invasion of Ukraine, we saw these same hacktivism groups now escalating their tactics and going from maybe defacing websites to very focused DDoS attacks. We've seen like No Name, one of the DDoS threat actors, having significantly stronger capabilities than a lot of the other DDoS groups, maybe signifying that they have access to larger resources, maybe they're state-backed. And they also see this targeting of OT networks specifically. So we had like like the predatory sparrows targeting a steel mill in Iran. So they were pro-Israeli hacktivism group. That actually caused a physical kinetic impact. They had like hot molten steel all over the place. So that's the escalatory aspect of this sort of threat of hacktivism. So yeah, that's the gist of the research. This is also quite fresh. I recommend you check it out if you're interested. It's free and available on ArchiveX. And yeah, quoting Rick, who was one of the lead writers there. So he sort of states that, these hacktivism groups, they're unconstrained by diplomacy in the way that state threat actors are. They don't have the same sort of strict agenda in many cases. And they're unconstrained by return of investment. So this needs to make money in terms of the way that the cyber criminals act. So they don't have those restraints. And by this measure, Rick sort of estimates that this threat from hacktivists is only going to get worse. So that's sort of me being the problems guy. It's important to keep this in mind, I think. A lot of you maybe also need this in order to make your messages heard in your own organizations. But obviously, it's not all doom and gloom, right? We have, fortunately, solutions to address this. There are ways to go about it, and that is what we're going to spend the rest of the webinar on. So with that, I hand it over to Andreas and Martin to sort of fix all of the problems I highlighted.
Yes, and it is a lot of
Thanks.
problems, right? It definitely is a lot of problems, and our solution is not easy, but at least it's maybe simple in some ways, right? Because how do we do this? We need to increase our resilience, and we need to do this in a risk-based way, and that's kind of what we'll try to highlight over the next couple of minutes to kind of say, what is it you need to focus on and how do you actually tackle this? Because it is quite a beast maybe for some. One of the things we hear a lot, and that is maybe time to retire, is the fact that OT security is an emerging concern. OT security has been an emerging concern for a long time. And I think it's about time we recognize that it's not just an emerging concern anymore. We are now so interconnected with the way OT operations happen that we need to say this is business critical. We cannot separate it out as a thing we need to do somewhere down the line. And this is more a why than a how, but I thought it was relevant to start out with saying that we need to have a mindset that OT security is business critical. The way we connect our OT systems now with IT systems and so on to stay competitive is a requirement for many verticals. You cannot have an OT system that is not dependent on some kind of IT system in some way through integrations. You see it either via ERP systems connected to your OT system for supply management and doing the whole intake of orders, stuff like that. ERP has become, an OT system of its own. We see a lot of autonomous mobile robots running around that's requiring wireless. All of these things are not just important for OT and for OT security, it's important for the business. The business cannot operate without these things, and that is some of the things that we want to highlight here, is that you have added a lot of dependencies through the years, and maybe a lot of these dependencies have been added kind of unwillingly and unknowingly from a security perspective. So the first question you kind of need to tackle when it comes to OT security, and I think this is an important one, is, and this may vary, but what is OT? We have a lot of different definitions, and I think if I ask 10 people, I will get 9 answers at least. We have a definition of what we see, and how far you take it, of course, depends on your system. But what we kind of say is that OT equipment consists of hardware and software that interacts with physical environment. The way it does it is either by monitoring or controlling. And most people know this when it comes to equipment and assets. What is an important thing to add that some forget, in my experience anyway, is that things that are monitoring or controlling the processes should also be classified as OT, because your process may be outside of what is actually on the production floor. And I think this is very important to remember when you're doing your classification, and maybe even your framework for how you should classify what is OT, that you need to be aware of your full process. So you go into it with, an open mind to what could potentially be OT for us. What is important for our process to function? What we have added here is that any device designated for maintaining, controlling production, availability, and especially safety should and must be identified and treated as an OT device, no matter what OS, switch layer, network connectivity, and so on it is, because it is absolutely critical to have these devices specifically under the umbrella of OT security and handled accordingly. Then comes the whole question of how far should you go when you're classifying OT. Coming from an IT side, I know that many customers don't want to classify their ERP system as an OT environment or an OT system. I don't know, Andreas, coming from the OT side, if you have a different view on it.
No, the ERP system is an IT system. It is. But you always need to focus a little bit on what are the dependencies, and if you are reliant about the ERP system, how is the communication flow? How do you communicate towards the OT side? How have you made that one secure? Because in the end, if something happens on the IT side, as Björn said, main areas of the attacks come from the IT side. Now you need to have made it more secure. And also, one important thing is, if you need to disconnect your ERP system, what is plan A? How long can you produce? What is plan B? To keep the production running if you need to be disabled from the IT side. Because it could be quite critical if the machinery on the production floor or anywhere, if that stops, they need to have the plan A, B, C, D in place.
Sorry
That's a good
to
point.
interrupt here. I didn't receive a question per se, but we have a statement that has been added to the discussion that I wanted to toss in here. So Jacob writes in that from his point of view, complexity is one of the biggest risks to OT. As integrations with IT increase, so do the dependencies and fragilities that can threaten operational stability. The danger isn't only from threat actors, it's also from the complexity itself. We must establish clear guardrails to protect OT environments, ensuring they remain resilient, predictable, and secure regardless of what happens in IT. And that was from Jacob. And maybe if you have any additional comments on that.
No,
I couldn't
totally
agree
right.
more.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think he nailed it. I like when we
It's
do
really
this.
good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it also underscores the confluence there in the beginning, where we see that we have all these reported attacks that have an impact on OT, but it turns out they're the majority of them are actually IT based. And that was also my point in terms of, I believe what you're also discussing here is loss of visibility. It maybe deceptively seems mild because after all, nothing is really happening on the physical plant floor, but we only lost visibility. But that is also super critical. I saw the Senate hearing in the after the Colonial Pipeline attack, and I believe they testified something along the lines of that the entire company was close to going bankrupt, but there was no impact to the OT operations. In fact, this was the huge fuel pipeline in America that was shut down by a ransomware attack, only targeting IT. But again, what you're discussing now, that means they have complete loss of visibility on what's happening, and that they had to shut everything down. So yes, it's very valid points being made, I think.
Yeah, and that comes back to having identified your OT systems, because you need to be able to have that visibility if you need to disconnect from the IT side.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's a matter of, when you're talking IT, you talk a lot about security. I think the wording is often different, right? When you're talking OT, I like to word things like resilience and robustness, because that's really what we're trying to do, right? We need to make it robust against whatever. Is it, our own IT operations doing random patches? Is it bad Wi-Fi interference because of radar from ships? Is it cyber criminals? Whatever it is, our OT environment needs to be robust to withstand whatever is thrown at it, friendly or not friendly. And I think that's the very important thing to have in mind.
So when we then have discussed a little bit more about OT systems and those things and know your OT, you need to focus on the complete OT area you have. Building management systems are also a crucial part, and we see OT systems everywhere. They have different kind of criticality level, but they are more or less around us everywhere today. So this is just a picture to kind of highlight that we have OT in buildings, healthcare, everywhere. And even if you go through a tunnel, you have an OT system in a tunnel, because all these different things are controlled by something. But when we begin to talk about OT security, many times management and the different areas, the stakeholders, they have one question: does it work? Yes, it works, even if we haven't worked with cybersecurity for so many years, because what is the main goal? Keeping the availability, keeping the production running. But many times when we ask, do you have control about the cybersecurity for your OT area? The main answer is no. And to begin working with OT security, there is no silver bullet on how are you going to improve. You can think of it as a slippery road. You will go forward a little bit, then you go a little bit left, a little bit right, but it has to be an ongoing work. But how do you begin this work? First of all, what is the current state? How does it really look in the OT side? Have you identified your OT systems? How are they communicating? And also now with the more IT and OT communication paths, how are the dependencies on everything? And where do you want to be in a couple of years to be able to have something forward? One thing that we are talking very much about, you need to begin to do a systematic cybersecurity work for the OT side. The same way as you're working with systematic fire safety, systematic work environment, and all comes down to these 5 points. Identify how it looks. Now you raise the awareness. Now you can begin to build a strategic plan on how to improve. Then the implementation phase comes. You do an evaluation, and it begins again. Continuous improvements of the OT side. Martin.
Yes, because then the matter comes, why is it important to work with OT security in the correct way? Because there are many ways to work with OT security. And I've been to a lot of companies where the thought of, segmentation is key. And I do believe that segmentation is a very important tool when it comes to OT security. But if you start doing segmentation as your first step, you're in for a really bad time. We've seen that time and time again because as was highlighted earlier, the complexity of OT has just exploded. It's supposed to be this very static environment, but as integrations toward IT has exploded, there is a lot of complexity. And you need to understand that complexity before you start actually doing implementations in your system. Because one of the most important things is, again, if we come in as cybersecurity professionals or OT professionals with a cybersecurity mindset and we start making things worse because we're implementing security, we're not going to implement any more security. So having the right mindset when you're doing this and doing it in a right way, as Andreas showed with this systematic approach, that is very important. One of the things we want to also say is that, identifying your risks and prioritizing them is important because it can be a lot and you need to have some sort of prioritization before you can do it. And that is, again, best if you have a risk-based approach. Let me just.
While you sort that out, Martin, we have a question that came in.
Yeah.
Besides the security itself, do you see compliance, NIS2 or CRA, as an additional driver to OT security?
Oh yes. We will actually touch a little bit around NIS2 in a couple of slides, and that is quite a big driver because now with NIS2 there are so many different areas also. And on the coming slides, we will focus a little bit more about the governance and regulations part. Martin, are you back?
Yes, I just can't see the presentation, the wonders of cyber, right?
Yeah.
And technology. So I will just do a quick rejoin. I think Andreas can take over for me while I'm away.
Yeah, okay. So if we continue what Martin talked about, it's more or less also, if you begin with the correct way, you can also prevent costly mistakes by needing to redo certain areas on and on again, since we'll come back to identifying your OT systems, then begin to do the segmentation instead of beginning segmentation and then you almost missed half of it. We also need to keep.
Sorry, Andreas. We have another statement that came in.
Yeah.
So I guess not so much a question, but main critical parameter in processes and production operations, and OT in general is the word safety. It makes the main difference between OT and IT. Anything affecting a safety critical component of the processes and production operations shall be protected from external actors' cyber attacks.
Yes.
Anything that you want to comment on that?
Actually, it was kind of the last sentence I put up on the screen, ensuring the safety. So it is really important because in the end, what the key words in the production is safety and availability, and that is the highest priority. Security comes as an aftermath usually. And also the key thing, keeping the operational continuity, the availability. Also, this is the highest priorities and the important things. Now it also begins to come with more and more compliance and regulations comes. So this is also something that needs to be had in mind when you begin working with the cybersecurity for the OT side, and being able to build a strong security culture. And with that in mind, let's go and look on some of the key elements of having an effective strategy. You need to establish security policies for the OT side and IT side. You can reuse some part of it from the IT side, but it needs to be fine-tuned, fine-adjusted for the OT side. Provide cross-country disciplinary, and also that it is also have a better communication and collaboration between the IT and OT teams. Conduct joint OT and IT risk assessment, because then we can focus on both the attack side of it and also how it looks on the OT side. Incident response plans. You need to have an incident response plans also for the OT side also. So but they need to be aligned. Training, awareness for the OT and IT staff. Security goals for the and KPIs, IT and OT, and standardize the secure protocols and authentication in OT systems where it's applicable, since we know many of these systems can be quite old, so it's quite hard to have strict rules on those ones. Then you need to have the risk-based approach, and you go back to what if you cannot do anything, then what are the mitigation actions you can take. But the main focus is still improving the OT resilience. It's the main goal of doing this. And we try to enlighten a little bit of some kind of a box on what to do. But first of all, as we said earlier, identify how it looks. For the OT side, you need to have a strong governance area. You need to have all these people and processes in place. You need to have the identified risks and all in the different areas. What are the requirements for the OT side? Now you can begin to talk about, after you have the people processes in place, what type of tools do you need to have? And implement the tools. And they need to be adjusted and adapted to be in an OT environment. If we then look a little bit around the different capabilities we are trying to have, first of all, it's the governance part for the OT area. What type of continuity and recovery capabilities exist, and how can they be improved? What type of posture management is in place? How is the security operations around the OT side? How does it look for the security awareness training, and how is the culture? Now, when you have done all these different governance areas, you need to begin to test and validate all the different policies, instructions, guidelines you have put in place. And also implement the detection and response capabilities. And what type of areas do we have in these 6 different headlines? For instance, when it comes to governance, risk, and compliance, we have many of the regulations that are coming. You need to have risk management strategies for the OT side. How are you going to work with it? How is the design for the OT? You need to begin to have a secure by design architecture. The supply chain management for the OT side, really important also. Then we come to the continuity and recovery capabilities. You need to have local incident response plans, continuity plans, disaster recovery plans for the OT area also. When it comes to security operations, kind of the zero trust implementation, are you going to begin to use AI in OT side? Cloud or no cloud? Is it possible to have cloud and keep the continuity? Or should everything be on-prem? Just to improve the resilience. And we need to have training sessions for the OT areas. Training sessions about the new regulation measurement also for management and the OT side. Now you need to begin to test what you put in place. For instance, vulnerability management cannot be handled the same way as the IT side. Here you need to make sure what can you patch or can you not patch. If you cannot patch, then what are the other mitigations as strategies? So it comes back a little bit how about risk assessment, risk-based approach on all these different areas. And one more thing, how is the system communicating? Where is the attack vector? It comes back to the most of the attacks come from the IT side. How do you mitigate these ones? And now we have the different tools. Can you have an endpoint protection? Visibility, the different areas where you can get the detection and respond capabilities. Anything to add, Martin?
Oh, I think that's it. I think for tabletop exercises, I think I want to highlight those as well, right? I've seen that, make it click sometimes when you have a very OT IT fragmented corporation. A tabletop exercise where you bring in participants from both sides kind of highlights the importance of it to some of the more operations focused people. Sometimes they can see, okay, this actually can impact us quite a lot, and it is something that we need to take into considerations. So I would definitely say that's also one of the things I would highlight. Yeah.
That feeds directly back to, doesn't it, into the previous step with the GRC, right? So if you have a tabletop, that'll give you a lot of inputs to how you shape your plans around risk management and asset stuff like that. I guess this is very recognizable, I think, to me as well. Talking from the IT side, especially the order of things that you're highlighting now, Andreas and Martin as well. I think with GRC is and getting the strategy right, at least getting a template in, right, having a point to work out from, and then you can continuously improve. But then the next part is also if I meet a business and they have sort of basically nothing in place today, then start with knowing yourself, and then you need to have immediately instant response and disaster and business recovery function in place, because before I end my sentence, you may be breached, right? So you need to have something in place first that can handle if things go to hell before you get all of the other 4 steps, into play. So I guess that's a lot of the logic here as well, Andreas, if I'm...
Yeah, of course. And many of these things, you have it most likely for the IT side, but you need to do the same for the OT side. And that comes a little bit back to when we begin to talk about NIS 2. We have a new regulation that is effective in Denmark right now, I think. Sweden will be implemented, and Norway a little bit later, hopefully.
Yeah, we just got NIS 1 was implemented October 1st in Norway.
Yeah.
So go well.
But if we then look on what is the high level technical and methodological requirements, what we have identified, this is very high level. Now we look on it from the IT point of view. We have information security, risk management policy, and all those things. But now let's change the glasses and let's look on it from the OT side of it. It's the same area, the same high level of the different areas, but they need to be worked a little bit different. For instance, point number 9, cryptography within OT. That might not be a possibility due of latency and those things, but the communication flow between IT and OT, there is a really important part where you can do and have the cryptography. For instance, also with the security policy, risk management, asset management, access control. It's also from the OT side of it. It also comes down to what we have mentioned quite a lot, that the risk-based approach is very essential for the OT side. You need to have a risk management framework. This is also highlighted in NIS 2, and also important to be able to improve the resilience in the OT side. So all of these different areas, they exist both for the IT and OT side. But there is a little bit of a twist, because you have a bigger dependency on the OT side. For instance, you have a bigger dependency on the suppliers. You have more suppliers that support you with the automation or those different areas. Here, this is more kind of a little bit more important to have a good control of those suppliers. What are the demands on those ones? For instance, when you procure things into the OT side, you will implement a new machine. What are the demands from a cybersecurity perspective from the OT side on that one? Have a change management process in place for when you do these things or do a change in the OT area. For instance, also vulnerability management and the security patching, that might not be able to be done. Then you need to have a different strategy, a different risk-based approach again. How are the systems set up? How are they communicating? Is it doable to patch or not? If not, mitigation action. Since we know that many companies still have, for instance, XP inside with the OT side, they cannot change it. Then what to be done? How do you mitigate? And one big important thing that the IT side doesn't have is inside of the backup redundancy area. PLC version control, backups. How do you handle the backups? If you are very dependent on a supplier, what are the demands on the supplier towards having the correct version and the backup of the PLC? What happens if that supplier go bankruptcy? Who owns the backups? If you don't own it, then if something happens to the system, how are you going to be able to repair it? So it comes back to same, but little different. And with that said, some key takeaways. We are almost over. And what can we say as a key takeaway from all of this? Identify your OT systems. That is one of the big things to do before you begin doing too many works. Think big and take small, precise steps. Don't try to do everything at the same time, because it will be too much. During the work, when you do this security journey, make sure you have somebody to talk to spar a little bit the ideas with. Segmentation, if you're going to do it, take it a small step by step, because some of these areas might need to have a big maintenance window. And be careful when choosing components and or software. Test, verify, and validate, so you don't get any interruptions in the production. And most of all, be patient. Let it take time. That's kind of it for us.
Did get in one question just now. Is the thinking that not all security patches updates shall be implemented in the OT systems is a correct approach? The main guideline for cyber hygiene given to the population in general is that any device or software getting a new version or update should be updated as soon as possible. It prevents any bad actors abusing the vulnerabilities covered in the latest update. So I guess the core question there is the thinking that not all security patches should be implemented?
It's good to think that you should implement all the security patches, but have in mind it will require a maintenance window. You need to have in place also a good testing procedure and a rollback plan in case it doesn't work. So if you are in a 24/7 production, how often do you get a maintenance window? It comes back a little bit to the criticality of the systems. How does it look? When can you do it? Can you test it? And if it doesn't work, revert. And some systems are not able to be patched. Then what are the mitigation actions? So it's the intention of applying patches. It's really good, but you need to do it according to how it looks and if possible. There are some systems that cannot be patched due of, for instance, if you have the OS is Windows, for instance, and you're working with DLL files in that system, there are 2 patches from Windows you never ever can put in place because then the whole system dies. So it's depending on how it looks.
And it's also important to remember the risk around it, right? Because it's like, okay, if you have something that is easily exploitable but requires, direct connection, how exposed is that system, right? If you have your segmentation in order and whatever is vulnerable can only be reached from 2 places that you feel are very, very secure, then that may be enough, right? You need to be, very risk aware. What is the actual risk? How would this be exploited before starting to plan things like patching? Because maybe you're okay with that risk because you have security along the way that makes it so unlikely to be exploited.
Or put in place virtual patching, that you put something in front of it and you can virtually patch it. Instead of touching the system, you have something in front of the system that removes the vulnerability. So
yeah, I was going to say that's the approach.
Yeah, so that's a little bit what the risk-based approach comes back to, what type of mitigation action you can do and what type of system it is. So that's why you need to have a different approach than the IT side.
And I guess that also your example here, Andreas, with having like XP running on a HMI or something like that. The problem also is that system is obviously out of end of life or end of support for a long time now, but it was never meant to maybe do that specifically, right? So it's something that wasn't purpose built for that specific purpose. So when the vendor publishes a patch, that might not be very smart, as what you mentioned with the DLL compatibilities and stuff, right? So that makes it more complex.
Yeah, and also since you have more and more SCADA systems and those things, they are very often deployed on, if it's an older system, it's could be Windows NT, Windows XP, and Windows Server 2003, 2008, or the newer versions. Then you might have Windows 10 and Windows 7 also inside of the OT area. And when it comes back to the XP machine, for the resilience part, you need to think of 2 things. If it's a physical device, can you work on can you virtualize it? So then you have an image you can restore and keep the system working, because that system or automation that is on that server most likely needs to be totally rewritten if you're going to upgrade it to a Windows 2019 or 22 server or something like that. So it comes back to a little bit, how is the system, how old is the system, what is it doing, and how can you improve it?
I think we're about out of time.
Yes, we are running out of time, but the the person who sent the question sent in a little follow-up that they agree totally. The message should be do a proper prioritization of vulnerabilities for patching and ensure that all patches are going to be managed. And we did get just one more question. The person who sent it did have to leave already, unfortunately. But if you do have a minute, how do you handle the lack of management acceptance that OT security has to be considered and managed? I think that might actually be a pretty important question.
Two things. First of all, if you are NIS2 affected, then you have a good driver, because NIS2 will also affect the OT side. Another one is to work on improving the resilience. When you work with improving the resilience, then you work with updating the availability. Now you can begin to work with both the security part and the improvements at the same time. Take it as one, because when you begin to work with a more structured way, I have seen it on my previous workplace, we got better availability, we got better resilience with working with both improvements and improving the cybersecurity area.
Totally agree. I mean, I've seen many places where a visibility project becomes, more a specific OT asset management thing, because the fact that you all of a sudden have maybe obsolescence management, spare part management in that system that you're trying to build actually for IT, OT, visibility, security, the fact that it can give that functionality that wasn't there before to the OT engineers, that sometimes help, move the budget away from OT security specifically to other parts, and you get best of both worlds, right?
Identifying the risks, and how just ask the management, what is a good, how long is it possible that we're standing still? If they say 2 hours, then you have 2 hours to work from. Okay, if something happens and we need to be up and running in 2 hours, what are the actions we need to take?
Gotta spend
Excellent
money where you make money.
All right. I would like to take this opportunity to just thank you three, Andreas, Björn, and Martin. I think that was a fantastic presentation. We've gotten quite a few comments on how great it was. So well done. If any of you who are still listening, I know we've gone over with a few minutes on our time here, but if you're listening still and you have any more questions, please send them to us. You can contact us through the website. We're going to reach out to you after this webinar with the recording and with the contact information. So do reach out to us if you have any more questions, or send them in the tabs here, and I'll be sure to get to you via email after this. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.